Black Lightning episode 5, and then the devil brought the plague. So this was a pretty cool episode. We finally got at least a bit of an answer on what in the world was going on with Gamby the Tailor, and we find out that he was actually a part of these weird experiments that involve Tobias, which is why we find out that Tobias is not exactly immortal, but he's gonna live for a super long time. They also show in the promo for the next episode he legitimately has super strength. So I was like, okay, that adds a new layer to his character, because I just assumed he was this former politician who turned into a pretty well-known criminal because he killed Black Lightning. And it turns out that there's these crazy experiments, which I have to assume with what Anissa was looking into, it's the exact same experiments. And I can hear like this thing like just rattling under my neck. So it was interesting watching. I was like, okay, so I think at some point these two stories are definitely gonna connect. We're gonna start to get answers about Tobias as a villain and a character because of what Anissa's looking into, which kind of involves her, because we find out that it's her grandfather that could have revealed the information, but then he was killed, which of course we know was by Tobias. So Tobias was probably like one of the earliest people to be experimented on, and then he was like, well, I like this, so I want to have more power later, if that at the time it was probably a possibility. So they kill and it's his grandfather, and obviously Pierce's dad. And so it was just an interesting thing, because it's like, all right, well, we have Tobias Well, who is gonna live for a super extended amount of time, has super strength. And then it's like, all right, well, I think in the video the guy talking about it was like there were like 13 kids or something crazy like that, like kids were being taken. So it makes me wonder how that's going to end up playing out, which I think that's one of those storylines where it's like, oh, you reference this and it's just like, oh, there's this big group of kids, Baker's dozen, and we only meet one in Tobias Well, but then season 2 and season 3 come along. That could be like the full storyline where it's like, these are some of the people kind of coming out of the woodwork now that they've gotten a grip on their powers, or that's just like whole thing. They probably won't do that, because I feel like that would be very Flash based, where it's like, oh, we got to stop all the crazy metahumans. But I feel like some of those characters at least could easily come back, and it's like, well, this is what happened to me. You guys already dealt with Tobias Well, you know how that is. Some of them could be good, some of them of course will be bad. So I think that's one of those lines where it's like they could easily kind of pluck that for like pretty much a full storyline going into season 2, or possibly season 3 if they want to save it for a couple more years. But I thought that was cool. And this is going in, doing the thing, getting this research to try to figure out what in the world's going on with her, because it's like, all right, well, it's these experiments, and my grandfather was involved in it, and I'm not too familiar with Black Lightning. I've mentioned that before. I'm not like super familiar with this character. I always assumed he just had normal powers, and that could be the case. They could totally just be changing it for this version of the story, but I always thought he naturally had powers. So I am curious if that's going to be something where we find out. He got those powers from those experiments, and maybe he didn't even realize that that's where his powers came from. He just thought it was a genetic mutation. And of course, that being the case, it led to a natural genetic mutation in Anissa, and that's how she has her powers. But with it having actual ties to her grandfather, it's like, okay, well, maybe we're going to learn something about Pierce that we didn't know. Maybe his powers aren't just some crazy mutation. Maybe it was much like the Flash. It was experiment based, and that's how, Jefferson got his powers. And then of course, like I said, that just naturally led to basically genetic mutations and superpowers being within his genetic code for his daughters. So I am curious where that's headed. And of course, they talk about how dangerous it is, because she goes to visit an old news reporter who used to work with her grandfather, and he kind of shooed her away the first time because he's really worried about people being in danger. And he gives her the info, and it's like, you got to be careful, because once if you find out who is actually watching, you might just end up dead. Because once you find out who they are, that means they probably already know who you are. So she goes, full superhero in this episode. She gets her costume and everything. It's getting pretty close to her actual costume. It was very blue and gold. And she goes through to get a bit more information from the storage unit and stuff like that. So I'm actually really excited to see what that's going to lead us to. I don't know if we're going to get like a ton of answers going into the next episode, but considering how every character pretty much is tied to it, is like it's her grandfather, which naturally ties to her dad. It could mean that he had experiments done on him that he wasn't aware of. Of course, it ties to Tobias Well, and also Gamby. So it ties to so many characters already, and then there's the speculation element of what it could mean. So I'm actually really excited to get some more answers on that, and get whenever they decide to do it, we're going to have like a giant chunk of a flashback episode, which could be the next one. They kind of teased it a little bit in this, where we got to see Tobias and his sister actually deal with their dad, and so they had like the flashback, which I thought was pretty good. I like the way they handled that, where it's the adult version of Tobias talking to his father and stuff like that. So I like the way that they did that. And of course, they go to see their dad, and it's like, mom left and you stayed around, and that's true. And so he hugs his dad, and then he breaks his back, and he's like, you're gonna die, but it's gonna be slow. And I thought, he was mad. It just made sense. So they deal with that issue. His sister helps him out with that, and so it's like, now we can go forward, because that was the thing that was always there that we can never kind of fight back against it, because he up and vanished on them. So they were able to find him and take care of him. So now they can kind of focus more on the future rather than always have that little bit of the past kind of holding them back. So I thought that was a cool element. So now they're going forward, and there was the scene where he opens up the letter, and it's like the bone dust, and they show Lady Eve where she's talking about the magic and all that stuff. So he has a letter. So things are kind of moving forward for him. I don't believe, if I remember it, because I did watch this on the day. I just had a really crazy week, so I didn't. That's why I'm reviewing it so incredibly late. But I don't believe they actually showed what was on the letter. If I remember right, I could totally be wrong. So like I said, it was a while ago when I saw it. Like the way they did it was very in the middle. It was like, that could be good, it could be bad. They kind of referenced the whole magic thing. So it's like, I'm not 100% sure if that's bad for him, but all in all, I thought it was a good storyline for his character. Of course, we have Pierce realizing that Tobias is alive, because he finds out that basically his right-hand man is still alive. So I thought that was a pretty cool sequence. And then, of course, the whole episode, he's going through and he's utilizing powers that he hasn't really had before, him flying and stuff like that. So he has like these crazy outbursts, like he's a bit angrier and stuff like that, and he has these crazy headaches, and then eventually when he's yelling at Gamby, he just passes out. So he passes out, and it's like, all right, well, we're definitely dealing with some crazy stuff, and naturally it's the normal situation where it's like, this is clearly something you should like just hold off on, let me figure it out. And he's like, nope, he's having his outburst, and it's like, I'm gonna deal with this, and he's in kind of crazy rage mode for revenge, and he goes to see the guy, and he gets the crap kicked out of him. It was the hero getting beat up moment where he has to have that reflection, like, I gotta let my allies actually help me out, and kind of figure out where I need to go from here. So he gets beat up, and that's just how they basically end the episode out. But I thought it was definitely an interesting storyline. Jennifer had a storyline as well. I don't know exactly what that's gonna lead to. It was kind of just, this one girl was messing with her. She was definitely a bitch of a person, because she was like, oh, hey, like she made fun of a guy getting paralyzed, and it was like, well, yeah, like break her arms, of course. So that was an issue and stuff, and it was just like, all right, interesting storyline for sure. And I love the scene with Jefferson. Like every time they have an argument, it's just him as just like the dad, where it's like, I'm getting yelled at. I didn't even do anything. Like every time they just have one of those sequences, he's either getting yelled at or nobody's listening to him, and it's just like, I don't know what to do. So that was definitely funny when the ladies came in and they were talking about their daughter. So I just thought that was a hilarious scene. So I love that for sure. But it'll be interesting to see how they continue Jennifer's storyline, because this was like her first taste of kind of going into that whole vigilante thing, and I don't know how far they're really gonna push it. It wasn't even vigilante; it was just her fighting back. But it was kind of that thing where consequences and stuff like that, which they kind of did with vigilante style with Anissa when she beat up those first two dudes. And it was like, oh crap, I may have like killed them because they stopped moving. So it's much different degree. It's just a natural fight. But it seemed interesting that they kind of brought it up, and there was a lesson there with her still being grounded, even though she wasn't the one that started it. It's like, okay, I feel like that's gonna lead to either it could lead to some interesting elements where she finds out what's going on with Anissa, and she's having her own experiences of far outside of powers and vigilantism, just dealing with being in trouble. And that I just think that would be an interesting dynamic. So I'm not sure where they're headed with it, because it seemed like it was kind of a non sequitur storyline. It was just, oh, their daughter was in a fight and then she got in trouble, because in this episode not much really happened. So I feel like something's going to come of it in the next episode or next couple. But I still enjoyed it, mostly because I feel like I hope it's going somewhere, because I was like, nothing, it didn't really do much. It was just an interesting sequence in the beginning, and then after that, the funny stuff with Jefferson. But I was like, all right, it didn't really lead to that much. They had like their conversation, but ultimately, maybe it was more for Jefferson himself, and that's what we'll see in the next episode. I don't know, but it was like, yeah, not much really happened with that storyline. It was kind of just in there, and then they had like their deep conversation, and even then it was like not too much really came of that. So I'm not sure where they're headed with it, but still thought it was good. They got lots of jokes in this episode. One of them being They kind of reference Batman, with the black signal, which I thought was really funny. He even disappears a lot like Batman in that sequence as well. So they've kind of introduced that dynamic where Jefferson calls his buddy, on the burner phone, and it's like, all right, well, or he has his buddy call him. It's like, all right, well, we have this information, but we don't really have enough for a warrant. We don't, there's not much we can do. So I'm giving you this information, as a bit of trust, and that's basically what leads him to, kind of get beat up at the end of the episode. But it'll be interesting to see things going forward because that was always that big thing. I was kind of surprised it actually happened in this episode, even though technically we haven't seen their full history. Obviously, they dealt with each other in the past before Jefferson retired as Black Lightning, but it was still kind of weird where it was like he gave him this phone. We're only a couple episodes in. I was kind of shocked that he would even take the phone and actually give him the call and stuff like that because the way they've done it, he seems so staunchly against it. It was kind of like, the Jim Gordon thing in the very beginning where he was so against Batman, and then I was like, okay, it didn't seem like it had that natural build, and I'm totally fine with it. Because that's always more entertaining, where it's like that'll lead to more action sequences and more trust and stuff like that. So it's always more entertaining than, we don't trust you at all, and that a whole deal. Like, it's never really that entertaining. So it's fine that they kind of just shot right past it, but I still noticed it. I was like, that seems super quick, where there was nothing that actually happened. There was no moment, I felt at least, that made it where that would be a thing where he would like kind of change his mind. It wasn't like Black Lightning saved him or his wife or anything like that. It was just like he met him and he gave him the phone, and then he was like, later in the episode he actually gave him the call, and I was like, oh, okay. I would like some sort of event to be the catalyst. It was kind of like he just did it, and I was like, huh, that seemed weird. Like he just kind of basically, it was kind of like he just changed his mind. So I was like, all right, well, like I said, ultimately I'm fine with it because it's gonna lead to better stuff compared to just, Black Lightning's bad, and every time they run into each other, it's like I could arrest you or I could shoot you and stuff like that, 100 times over. So I'm totally fine with them kind of just blazing past it. I do not mind whatsoever, but I'm definitely looking forward to the next episode. Like I said, my main interest is, as far as what this episode is set up, is definitely everything that Anissa is looking into. I want to know like all the secrets there. They show a clip in the promo for the flashback of Jefferson seeing Tobias actually kill his dad, so I am definitely interested in how that's going to end up playing out and exactly what he saw, and that might give us a couple of answers as to Jefferson and his powers, because a big thing with superpowers in all of comics is that it's some big traumatic event, or if it's X-Men based, it's always tied to puberty, but a lot of times it's either puberty or it's tied to strictly a traumatic event. So it's always those two situations. So this could definitely be how his powers were awakened. That might give us some answers as to whether or not he was experimented on, little drops in his orange juices, some weird stuff like that. But definitely looking forward to the next episode. Curious how things are going to pick up for him, as far as him getting beat up and having like these crazy aneurysms in a sense. So I'm definitely looking forward to how all that's about to play out. But all in all, definitely a fun episode once again. Naturally, want to know what you guys thought about this one. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. And I would love to know your theories on what Anissa's going to find out, like how you think that's going to go. Was Jefferson experimented on? Is that just his natural powers? What's going on with Gamby? Like, what was his role in that whole situation? Because he knew exactly who Tobias was. And, they talk about, the nigh immortality that he has. So Gamby was a huge part of it, which makes sense. It's like this dude who has like all these skills and stuff and all the connections still. So it makes sense that he would have been a part of that. But I would love to know your theories on just how all of that stuff is going to play out, and once the truths are revealed, what do you think is going to happen there? And of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.